A secret life, a dangerous love, a fateful choice. This is the story of Eva Braun, a woman who lived in the shadows, a woman who loved a man the world will never forget, a woman who made a final, shocking decision. In this audiobook, you will follow Eva's journey, from a young girl full of dreams to the hidden partner of one of history's most powerful men. You will hear about love, loneliness, secrets, and betrayal. You will feel her joy, her pain, her final moments. Each chapter is filled with drama and suspense. The story will take you deep inside the past. You will listen to whispered conversations, hear the echoes of war, and step into a world that was about to end. And while you listen, you will practice English. New words, clear sentences, exciting storytelling. This is not just a lesson. It is an experience. Are you ready? Then listen closely, because once you start, you won't want to stop. Chapter 1. A Quiet Beginning. Eva Braun came into the world on February 6, 1912. She was born in Munich, a peaceful city in southern Germany. Her family was middle class. They lived a simple but comfortable life. Her father was a strict man, a schoolteacher. Her mother was kind and gentle. Eva had two sisters, one older, one younger. Life was quiet, predictable, safe. As a child, Eva was full of energy. She loved to run, to play, to laugh. She did well in school, but she was not the best student. She enjoyed sports, dancing, and reading magazines filled with fashion and film stars. She dreamed of excitement, adventure, something beyond the life she knew. But in 1920s Germany, for a girl like Eva, the future was already decided. Finish school, find a husband, start a family, that was the path. But Eva wanted more. She was 15 when she first picked up a camera. She loved the way it captured moments, how a single picture could tell a whole story. Photography fascinated her. She spent hours looking at photographs in magazines, imagining herself behind the camera, capturing the world in light and shadow. It was more than a hobby. It was an escape. By 17, she was restless. School bored her. The days felt long. She wanted to work, to see the world, to find her place in it. That was when she saw the advertisement. A job at a photography studio in Munich. The name was familiar. Heinrich Hoffmann. He was famous, the official photographer of the Nazi Party. Eva didn't care about politics. She cared about cameras, about learning, about starting something new. She applied, and she got the job. At first, she was just an assistant. She answered phones, organized papers, cleaned equipment. She watched, listened, learned. She studied the way Hoffmann worked, the way he positioned the camera, the way he found the perfect light. She wanted to be more than an assistant. She wanted to take pictures, too. Then, one evening, everything changed. The studio was busy that day. People came and went. Laughter filled the room. The air smelled of chemicals from the darkroom. Eva worked quickly, arranging prints, making notes, when she heard a voice, deep, strong, commanding. She turned. A man stood near the door talking to Hoffman. He was older, much older, dark hair slicked back, a small mustache, a sharp suit. His presence filled the room. Everyone looked at him. Everyone listened. Eva did not know who he was. Not yet. She kept working, trying not to stare. Then Hoffman called her over. "Eva," he said, "come here." She walked forward. "This is Herr Hitler," Hoffman said. "Adolf Hitler." The name meant nothing to her. He was just a man, another visitor to the studio. He looked at her, smiled slightly, nodded. His eyes were sharp, blue-gray, watching, measuring. He said something polite, something she did not remember later. She only remembered how he looked at her, how, for one brief moment, she felt important. Then he turned away, back to his conversation. And the moment was over. That night, Eva lay in bed, thinking about him. There was something strange about him, something different. He wasn't handsome, he wasn't young, but there was something powerful, a way of speaking, a way of holding himself. People listened when he talked. People admired him. She did not know it yet, but she would see him again. In the weeks that followed, he returned to the studio. Not often, not regularly, but sometimes. And each time he noticed her. He asked about her work. He made small jokes. He smiled. She blushed. One afternoon, he asked her to stay after work, just for a moment. She hesitated, but she stayed. He spoke softly, asking about her family, her hobbies, her dreams. His voice was gentle, almost fatherly. She felt special, chosen. No one had ever looked at her that way before. He was nearly 40. She was just 17. But that did not seem to matter. Not then. Their conversations grew longer. He told her about art, about history, about Germany's future. He did not speak about war. He did not speak about power. To her, he was simply a fascinating man, full of ideas and stories. He was unlike anyone she had ever met. And then, one evening, he invited her to dinner. She went. They dined in a quiet restaurant, away from the crowds. He was charming, attentive. He talked about his favorite films, his favorite books. He told her she was beautiful. She laughed. She felt important. She felt grown up. But when the evening ended, he said goodbye and left. No kiss, no touch. Just a nod, a smile, and he was gone. She waited for another invitation. Days passed, then weeks, nothing. She told herself she didn't care. He was just a man, just another customer at the studio. But late at night, she thought about him, his voice, his eyes, the way he made her feel. Then, one afternoon, a message arrived. From him. She read it quickly, her heart pounding. He wanted to see her again. She smiled. She was ready. Chapter 2. A Chance Meeting. The day was like any other. The studio smelled of ink, paper, and developing chemicals. Heinrich Hoffmann moved quickly, giving orders, arranging photographs, speaking to clients. Eva Braun worked quietly, placing prints into folders, cleaning lenses, preparing cameras. Then, the door opened. A man entered. She did not look up at first. Visitors came and went all the time. Politicians, artists, party members. But this voice, it was different. Deep, serious, controlled. A voice that filled the room. She turned, just for a moment. The man stood near the window. Dark suit, polished shoes. His posture straight, his hands behind his back. A small mustache, neatly trimmed. Sharp eyes, cold but curious. He listened as Hoffman spoke, nodding slightly, his expression unreadable. Then Hoffman called her name. She froze. "Eva," he said, waving her forward. She stepped closer. Her heart beat a little faster. "This is Herr Hitler," Hoffman said. "Adolf Hitler." The name was familiar. She had heard it before, in newspapers, in conversations, on the radio. People spoke of him with admiration, with fear, with respect, but to her, he was just a man, another client. He turned to her, offering a slight smile. "Fräulein Braun." His voice was softer now, polite, curious. He held out his hand. She hesitated, then took it. His grip was firm, not too strong, not too weak. He held her hand just a second longer than expected. Then he let go. "You work here?" he asked. "Yes, Herr Hitler." "You are young." She smiled. 17. He nodded. "And do you enjoy your work?" "I do," she said. He watched her, studying her face. Then, just as quickly as he had noticed her, he turned away. The conversation was over. Eva returned to her work, but she felt different. It was a strange feeling. Not fear, not excitement, just curiosity. That evening, she told her mother about the meeting. "He was polite," she said. "Not at all like I expected." Her mother nodded. "Stay away from men like that." But she didn't. Days passed, then weeks. Life continued as before. But then, he returned. The second time was different. He walked into the studio, speaking with Hoffman, laughing at a joke. Then, his eyes found her. He smiled slightly, as if he remembered. "Fräulein Braun," he said. She felt her face grow warm. "Herr Hitler." He did not speak to her long. Just a few questions, a few polite words, but it was enough. Enough to make her wonder. Enough to make her think about him long after he had gone. The third time, he stayed longer. He spoke about art, about photography, about Germany. She listened, fascinated. He had a way of speaking, a way of making even small things seem important. Then, suddenly, he laughed. A real laugh. Soft, unexpected. "I am boring you," he said. "No, Herr Hitler," she said quickly. He smiled again. Not cold this time. Almost warm. When he left, she felt different. She told herself it was nothing. He was just a man, just another visitor. But her hands trembled as she cleaned the lenses that evening. Weeks passed. He came to the studio again, and again. Each time he spoke to her a little more, asked a little more, noticed a little more. Then one day, a message arrived. A note. Small, neat handwriting. A simple invitation. Dinner. She read it twice. 3 times. Her heart pounded. Why her? She was not beautiful, not famous, not important. She was just an assistant, a girl in a photography studio, but he had chosen her. She hesitated, thought of her mother's warning, thought of her quiet life, her simple world. Then she smiled. She would go. Chapter 3. The Secret Woman. Eva Braun lived in the shadows. She was not seen in public with him. She could not hold his hand, walk beside him, or appear in photographs together. To the world, she did not exist. She waited for his letters. She watched the phone, hoping it would ring. Sometimes days passed with no word. Sometimes weeks. Then suddenly a message would arrive, a short note, a few words. He wanted to see her, and she would go. He controlled everything. When they met, where they met, what she could say, what she could not. She learned to stay quiet, to smile, to never ask too much. She understood her place. She was his, but only in private. At first, it felt exciting. The secrecy, the mystery, the thrill of being chosen. But soon she began to wonder, was this love? Or was she simply another part of his world, like his suits, his books, his paintings? He gave her gifts, beautiful dresses, expensive jewelry, fine perfumes. He made sure she had everything she needed, but what she needed most was him, and he was never there for long. When he left, the house felt empty. The silence was heavy. She filled the time with photography, with music, with long walks in the garden. But no matter what she did, she was always waiting. Waiting for his return, waiting for his voice, waiting to matter again. She was 20 now, no longer the young girl from the photography studio. She had changed. She knew things now. How to smile when she felt lonely. How to pretend everything was fine. How to accept that she would never be like other women. She was not his wife, not his public companion. She was a secret. A woman who lived behind closed doors. And yet, she stayed. Her family did not understand. Her mother worried. Her father disapproved. But Eva refused to listen. He loves me, she said. He needs me. But did he? He never wrote love letters. He never spoke of the future. He never promised anything. And yet, she loved him completely. She followed his rules. She did not question him. She did not ask for more. But deep inside, something began to change. A small voice, whispering, "What about me?" One evening, she sat alone in a dark room, staring at the telephone. It had not rung in days. She felt invisible, forgotten, unimportant. The walls closed in around her. The loneliness was unbearable. She opened a drawer and took out a small pistol. Her hands trembled. For a moment, she thought of her life, of the choices she had made, of the man she had given everything to. Then, a sudden thought. Would he even care? She lifted the gun. Then, a noise. Footsteps outside. A door opening. A voice. Her sister. The gun fell to the floor. Tears filled her eyes. What had she almost done? She promised herself she would never feel that way again. She promised herself she would not let loneliness destroy her. But promises were easy to make and hard to keep. Days later, he sent flowers, a note, a few kind words. She smiled. He still cared. And just like that, she was his again. Chapter 4. Loneliness in Luxury. The house was grand, filled with everything she could ever want. Expensive furniture, elegant chandeliers, paintings on the walls. There were beautiful gardens, endless views of the mountains, and rooms decorated just for her. It was a world of comfort, a place where she was meant to feel special. But something was missing. She walked through the long hallways, her footsteps echoing on the polished floors. She sat by the window, watching the birds fly freely through the sky. She had everything except the one thing she wanted most. Him. Days passed slowly when he was away. She read books, listened to music, played with her dogs. She wrote letters, though she never knew if he read them. She tried to stay busy, but nothing filled the emptiness inside her. The silence stretched on, heavy and endless. She was not allowed to be part of his public life. She did not sit beside him at meetings. She did not stand next to him in photographs. She was hidden, always in the background. The world did not know her, did not speak her name. When he was there, everything felt different. The house was full of people, officers, advisors, important guests. She watched from a distance, listening to their voices, hearing their laughter. She smiled, said little, stayed in her place. She understood the rules. But when they were alone, he was softer, quieter. He told her stories, made small jokes, sometimes even smiled. He spoke of art, of history, of things beyond war and politics. In those moments, she felt close to him. She believed he needed her, that she mattered. Then he would leave again, and the house would become a prison. The walls seemed to close in, trapping her inside a life she had chosen but did not fully understand. She tried to stay strong. She told herself she was lucky. Other women dreamed of the life she had: beautiful clothes, expensive gifts, the attention of the most powerful man in Germany. But deep inside, she knew the truth. She was not his equal. She was not his wife. She was not free. She wanted more. More than stolen moments. More than whispered promises. She wanted to walk beside him, not remain in the shadows. One evening, she sat in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. The fine silk dress, the delicate pearls, the perfect hair. She looked like a woman who had everything, but her eyes told another story. She reached for a pen, opened a notebook, and began to write. She wrote about her loneliness, about her days spent waiting. She wrote about the laughter that faded too quickly, the silence that lasted too long. She wrote about the life she wanted but could never have. Then she closed the book, placed it in a drawer, and locked it away. She would not leave. She could not. She had made her choice. And so, she waited. Chapter 5. 2 Attempts to Leave. The walls of her world felt smaller every day. She woke up in the same room, walked the same halls, saw the same faces. She had everything: comfort, beauty, privilege, but none of it filled the emptiness inside her. She lived in a golden cage. But a cage was still a cage. He was always gone. When he did visit, it was never for long. He spoke to her as if she were a child, someone to entertain, to control, to keep in place. He made decisions for her, told her what to wear, what to read, where to go. When he smiled at her, she felt important. When he ignored her, she felt invisible. She wrote letters, long pages of her thoughts, her loneliness, her love. Sometimes he responded with small notes. Sometimes there was silence. The waiting became unbearable. One evening, she sat alone, staring at the flickering candlelight. The house was quiet. No voices, no footsteps, no laughter, just silence. She had no place in his world, no title, no future, no promise of anything more. A wave of sadness filled her. She reached for a small bottle. Her hands trembled. A deep breath. Then, darkness. When she opened her eyes, the world was still there. A doctor stood beside her, a cold cloth pressed against her forehead. She was weak, but alive. He had come. He had read the letter she left behind. And now he was by her side. "You are foolish," he said, his voice sharp. "Do not do this again." She felt ashamed, but also something else. For the first time in weeks, she had his full attention. He looked at her, spoke to her, cared for her. She whispered, "I cannot live like this." He did not argue. He did not promise to change. But he stayed a little longer. He brought her flowers. He held her hand. He made her feel like she mattered again. Then he left. Days passed. Weeks. The house felt the same. The loneliness returned. The silence was louder than before. Nothing had changed. She tried to be strong. She told herself she was lucky. She told herself he loved her in his own way. But the feeling of emptiness grew. One evening, she walked to her desk and picked up a pistol. Her heart pounded. She closed her eyes. Then, a sound. A door opened. Her sister's voice. "Eva, what are you doing?" She gasped, the gun slipping from her hand. It fell to the floor. Tears ran down her face. Her sister ran to her, arms around her, holding her close. "You must leave," she whispered. "This life is killing you." But she could not leave. She would not. She wiped her tears, forced a smile, and whispered, "I'm fine." Days later, a letter arrived. His words were softer this time. He told her she was important to him, that he needed her to stay. He sent gifts, fine clothes, perfumes, a promise of a new car. He wanted her happy. He wanted her there. And just like that, she stayed. She told herself she had no choice. She told herself it was love. But deep inside, she knew the truth. Before we begin Chapter 6, a quick note for our listeners. You're currently listening to this audiobook on Woo English. Remember, this content is specially made for Woo English listeners only. If you're hearing it on any other channel, it may be a violation of Woo English's rights. Please ensure you're tuned into the right source to fully enjoy and respect this audiobook journey. Now, let's continue the story. Chapter 6. The Shadow Wife. She lived in a world of half-truths and quiet agreements. She was not his wife, but she acted like one. She waited for him, stood by his side in private, listened when he spoke, laughed when he laughed. At dinners she played her part, elegant, cheerful, knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. The others treated her with respect, but they knew the truth. She was not like them. She had no official place. She told herself it did not matter. She told herself she was happy. But at night, alone in her room, the doubts crept in. He made time for her, but only on his terms. He showered her with gifts, but never with true affection. He controlled her world, but never let her fully enter his. She wanted more, a real place in his life, a title, a future. One evening, she gathered the courage to ask. The fire crackled in the large stone fireplace. He sat in his chair, reading, a glass of wine untouched beside him. She stood nearby, waiting for the right moment. Finally, she spoke. "Why do you hide me?" His eyes lifted from the page. He frowned. "I do not hide you." Her hands tightened into fists. "Then why can no one know? Why do I live like this?" He set the book down. "You do not understand," he said, his voice calm, controlled. "The people would not accept it. They need me to belong to them, not to a woman." His words were final. A decision already made long ago. There would be no discussion, no argument, no change. She felt her heart sink. She should have expected this. Days passed, weeks. She went back to her role, the devoted partner, the quiet woman in the background, the one who understood without asking for too much. But inside, something shifted. Then, one evening, everything changed. He took her hand, a rare moment of softness. His eyes, usually distant, were steady, serious. "You are important to me," he said. She held her breath. "When the time is right," he continued, "we will be married." The words shocked her. Marriage, a promise she had never expected to hear. Her heart pounded. Could it be real? She wanted to believe it. She wanted to hold on to those words, let them erase the years of waiting, of uncertainty. But something inside her hesitated. Was it love, or just another illusion? She smiled, nodding as if she believed him. But deep inside, she was no longer sure. Chapter 7. The Last Days in the Bunker. The ground above shook with every explosion. Dust fell from the ceiling. The air smelled of smoke, damp stone, and fear. Outside, Berlin was burning. Inside, deep underground, she sat in silence. The bunker was dark and cold. The narrow hallways echoed with hurried footsteps and whispered conversations. Officers came and went, their faces pale, their eyes filled with quiet panic. The end was near. Everyone knew it. She could leave. Others had. Some had escaped the city, searching for safety in the countryside. She had a choice. She could walk away, disappear, start again, but she did not. She had made her decision. "I am staying with you," she whispered. He did not argue. He did not ask her to go. He only nodded, as if he had expected it all along. For years, she had lived in the shadows, hidden from the world. Now, in these final days, she stood beside him. The bunker walls closed in. Time moved slowly, marked only by the distant sound of bombs. The city above them was falling. Streets once filled with parades and flags were now covered in rubble. The world he had built was crumbling. She did not cry. She did not beg. She accepted what was coming. A simple ceremony was arranged. No music, no flowers, no family, just a few witnesses, their faces lined with exhaustion. He took her hand. She spoke the words, and for the first time, she was Eva Hitler. It should have been a happy moment, a dream she had once held on to so tightly. But now, it felt like an ending, not a beginning. Champagne was poured. Glasses were raised. There was laughter, forced and hollow. Outside, the world was collapsing. Inside, they played their final roles. The bunker grew quieter. One by one, people disappeared. Some chose to run. Others prepared for the inevitable. She sat alone in their room, the small space filled with flickering candlelight. Her wedding dress lay across the chair, untouched. She traced the lace with her fingertips, remembering a time when marriage had meant a future. Now, it meant only goodbye. He entered the room, moving slowly. His face was pale, thinner than before. The weight of everything pressed on his shoulders. He sat beside her, silent for a long time. Then, at last, he spoke. "It is time." She nodded. She reached for his hand. He did not pull away. The doors were locked. The outside world disappeared. She closed her eyes. A deep breath. Then, silence. Chapter 8. A Wedding in the Shadows. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of burning candles and old smoke. The walls were thick, shutting out the world above. In the distance, muffled explosions rumbled like distant thunder. The ground trembled, but inside, everything was still. The ceremony was brief. a table, a few papers, 2 signatures, no church bells, no music, no celebration. The witnesses stood in silence, their faces tired, their expressions empty. No one spoke of the war, of the past, of what was coming. They all understood. She stood beside him, her hands steady. Her dress was simple, nothing like the white gowns she had imagined as a girl. The fabric was smooth beneath her fingers. It did not matter. This was all there was. He looked at her, his eyes darker than before, shadowed by exhaustion and defeat. He spoke the words without emotion, his voice quiet but firm. She repeated them, her voice softer but clear. The vows bound them together, though not in life, only in the moments that remained. A pen scratched against paper, a signature, a name changed. She was no longer Eva Braun, she was Eva Hitler. The witnesses murmured their congratulations. The room was small, crowded, too warm. A bottle of champagne was opened. Glasses were filled. Someone made a toast. The bubbles rose to the surface, shimmering in the dim light. She smiled, lifting her glass. It was a strange feeling. The thing she had waited for, dreamed of, longed for, had come at the very end. He was different that night, softer. He looked at her in a way he never had before. There was no urgency, no distraction, no orders to give, no speeches to prepare. There was nothing left but time, running out second by second. She did not cry. She did not ask him to change his mind. She had made her choice long ago. The bunker was quiet now. The voices faded. The doors closed. She rested her head on his shoulder. He did not pull away. For the first time, he truly belonged to her. Tomorrow, the world would end. But tonight, she was his wife. Chapter 9. The Final Decision. The bunker was silent. The walls, thick and heavy, shut out the chaos above. The ground trembled with distant explosions. Somewhere far away, gunfire cracked through the ruined city. But inside, there was nothing but stillness. The end was coming, and they all knew it. Eva sat beside him, her hands folded in her lap. Her dress was neat, her hair carefully styled. She had chosen to look her best, even now. Her breathing was calm. She had made her decision long ago. He sat across from her, pale and thinner than before. His hands rested on the armrests of his chair. His gaze was distant. His face, once so full of control, now seemed tired, drained of everything except the weight of what was to come. The others whispered in the next room. People moved in and out. Their steps hurried, their voices hushed. Papers were burned. Orders were given. Plans for escape, for surrender, for survival. But not for them. There was no future waiting outside these walls. She had been given a choice. She could leave, disappear into the world, start again. There were ways out of Berlin, hidden paths, desperate chances, but none of them mattered. She would not run. She had spent too many years waiting for this man. She had given him her youth, her loyalty, her love. She had followed him into the shadows, lived in secrecy, accepted the loneliness. And now, at the very end, she would stay. She looked at him, He had never been affectionate. Never the kind of man who whispered loving words or made promises he could not keep. But he had given her a place by his side, even if the world never saw it. Now, in these final hours, she would take that place for the last time. A knock on the door. A quiet voice. It was time. She stood, smoothing the fabric of her dress. Her hands were steady. There was no fear, no hesitation. He rose too, slower, as if the weight of his decisions had finally settled onto his shoulders. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. No words were needed. They understood each other now. She reached for his hand. He did not pull away. For the first time in years, there was nothing standing between them. No politics, no power, no war. Just this moment. The doors were locked. The room was quiet. The world outside no longer mattered. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and accepted her fate. Then, silence. A final breath. A final moment. And then nothing.